Several listeners had questions of conservative dorkery. For one, how would you explain the term paleocon to probably the vast majority of people in this country and even among listeners who don't understand it? And where do you think it fits into conservatism today?
I thought it was really subtle and ironic the way you asked that question. How would you answer what a paleocon is? I mean, I heard that. I mean, it's like next year you're going to be telling me that, I should listen to more Wagner. I'm sorry, Wagner.
I did serve bagels this morning, appropriately enough.
So stipulated that there are paleocons who will not like this answer, but then again, there are a lot of paleocons who do not like me, so screw it.
I was going to say, would they like you whatever you said?
No, that's the point. It's like the lack of good faith from a lot of them makes it impossible to have this conversation. But the first thing to remember is just I'm not talking about the underlying philosophy of paleocons. So is very old, and we can have a different conversation about that in a second. But the term paleocon is more recent than the term neocon. And that's the important thing to keep in mind, is that paleocons in the early 80s started calling themselves paleocons to differentiate themselves from the neocons. Because the phrase neocon came first, and there are arguments about who coined it, and I can trust me, I can do them, but we're not going to do that here. But for people who don't know, neocons were disproportionately Jewish, but there are a lot of non-Jewish neocons. A lot of paleocons do not want to acknowledge that sometimes. Not all of them, but quite a few. And the great battle of neocons versus so-called paleocons was over Bill Bennett, Catholic, by the way, who Reagan appointed to head, I think it was the National Endowment for Humanities in 82, over this guy, Mel Bradford, who was not a neocon. And so the people who rallied to Bradford came to be known, or came to style themselves as paleocons, because they didn't like these new interlopers into conservatism. Some of the different flavors of paleocon really depend on which neocons they don't like, right? Because they're differentiating themselves. I think that the way I would define a paleocon today is just simply someone who claims, because I think often they are full of fecal matter on this stuff, but someone who claims to be representing the truer, more authentic strains of American conservative thought, early National Review, rightly understood kind of thing. There is a big subsection. Let me put it this way. I don't think all people who would use the term paleocon are bad people by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know that Michael Brennan Doherty would still call himself a paleocon, but he is certainly paleocon adjacent. I think he's a wonderful guy, really smart. I disagree with him on a bunch of things. Don't think there's a bigoted bone in his body. He's a decent human being, yada, yada, yada. And there are a lot of people like him out there. So I don't want to be too sweeping and insidious about this. At the same time, there is a subset of the paleocon crowd that is deeply invested in the lost cause stuff of the South. And the most amazing manifestation of this was actually not paleoconservatives, but paleo-libertarians, who, of the sort of Lew Rockwell strike, kind of really rallied around. I mean, they'll deny this. They'll say, look, they're about states' rights and federalism and all these kinds of things. But you didn't have to scratch too deep, about some of the people who would write at places like VDare. You didn't have to scratch too deep to find this bizarre oxymoron lurking amidst the muck, which was of libertarians for slavery, which is just so philosophically problematic. It's really difficult to get your head around. And so today, I feel like maybe Chronicles still calls itself paleoconservative. I don't know, and I don't much care. But for the most part, it feels like the paleocon types have basically given up calling themselves paleocons because they don't like the word conservative now. And instead, they call themselves nationalist. And one of the great and tragic things of this moment is that some of the worst enemies of the former Paleocon crowd, the sort of the Claremont Institute crowd, are now essentially paleocons. They're just under the flag of nationalism instead of paleoconservatism. And I think it's sad and pathetic and weird. And not everybody at Claremont, there are good people there still, but certainly if you go by their internet presence, their Twitter presence and that kind of thing, and their involvement in politics, the crazy weird people are really drowning out the decent, sane, smart people.